We hired someone to look at the business and say, what is the capital that you needed to relaunch this business? And where would that capital come from?
He looked at what capital you need, where would the capital come from, and how did you go about finding it? Did you look at the bank stores? Who do you look at?
Obviously you'd look at your current banking arrangements and see whether that was, where you should explore. But while doing that, one of his suggestions was, why don't we look at private equity funding? And I'll tell you, it wasn't something that was on my radar at the time. You tend to think of traditional financing and financing coming from the banks. And the suggestion of private equity funding was a different, approach to financing. It entailed doing road shows and info memes on your business, and maybe releasing more information about your business than you would normally do, because the private equity funding tends to want to understand the core of the business.
You want to do a deep dive.
Yes, and although that may seem as a tedious process to go through, what I've come to understand is there's a huge benefit for it, because it allows you to look internally, and it forces you to look at yourselves and say, how can I do this better? So approaching the private equity funds, has been a benefit, has been beneficial to the business.
Which private equity funds were you able to attract? I don't know of many.
Well, I'll tell you one that we've ended up going to get into bed with, and that's KCL.
Yeah.
So we're very appreciative for the process that we've gone through with KCL. What we've come to understand with private equity funding, but more specifically with KCL, is that the strength and the focus is really on what is the management like, and what's the management capability, and what's the corporate governance structures around that management, and how they deliver what they do, and can they deliver it consistently. So it's not so much about what has obtained in the past in terms of profitability and that sort of thing, but is there a structure in place that can deliver that profitability and that can execute this brand in the future? And that's what they've brought to the table.
So Brian, you started off the business in 2009. The idea came to you in 2009. You got it off the ground 2010, 2011, thereabouts. Here we are in 2019, almost a year after you've done your IPO on the Junior Stock Exchange. But what I want to know is, back in the earlies, when you were trying to get financing for the business, what were the challenges you found? Hitting all the banks, knocking on all the doors. What was that experience like?
Trying, to say the least. I think that inevitably a startup venture has a challenge of confidence in trying to generate enough of a sense of confidence in the product, the service, the managerial capacity, as well as just a vision for the overall business.
What actually worked for you to enable to get that financing?
Well, I would certainly think and say that in hindsight, number one, I think talking to a number of different operators in the financing space, and I would have to highlight in that process meeting Kerwin Valley and the KCL team, because I think they certainly had a shared vision that we could collaborate on and see it. It helped that Kerwin had a lot of experience in Canada, which is where IMAX was initially from, being a Canadian corporation with a strong Hollywood presence, but the real technology comes out of their Toronto office. And he was very familiar with the overall IMAX philosophy, ecosystem, and the big screen, the fun stuff in the 3D.
Right. Yeah, he's a movie buff. Yeah.
Correct. So I think that made it a much easier sale from the standpoint of someone who could actually kind of get it from, as he said, from hello, at least the concept, and then it came to how you really structure something.
You can't really approach this as a straight bank debt, right?
I don't think so. I mean, initially we were obviously looking for more of a traditional banking, but I think one of the key elements that any partner in finance can bring to the table, and certainly KCL fits that bid in a number of different ways, is being able to really craft a structure that's to the benefit of both the issuer as well as the financial community.
How did they structure this initial financing?
Well, we would have started with a big tranche of senior debt, but I think the wisdom that the team brought to the table was thinking that, okay, well, you guys need some additional equity capital. Let's look at a portion of your senior debt being structured as kind of, quasi-subordinated debt, really preference shares that had a dividend stream and dividend yield that was very debt-like, but yet could be treated as equity in our overall capital structure.
Okay, so KCL gave you this initial private equity financing. I think that was initially taken over by Aspire.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so receiving this financial equity, how has it helped your business to get to where you are right now?
Well, more of a long-term, vision. Certainly businesses in their infancy stages are going to have ups and downs, and I think long-term, more patient capital is what any startup venture would want, whatever industry you're in. The movie business in particular can be very seasonal. You can have great films and you can have not so great films. We think overall the trajectory is a positive one when you look at global industry metrics and historical elements. But certainly throughout any one particular year, you're going to have some element of seasonality.
Okay, so we talk about patient capital, long-term vision. So is it that KCL and Aspire still involved with you on a day-to-day, on a regular basis?
Very much so. They're still very strategic investors. I think they also had a wide enough vision to consider ancillary businesses, because we also had some exposure in the telecom sector, very briefly. But overall, I think having again, back to the whole shared vision and the long-term goal, which can go through various different incarnations. I think one is certainly, looking at the whole, listing process and what that can potentially bring. And I think as we, look to further expand the business and have multiple rounds of financing, we look forward to the KCL and Aspire team playing a very meaningful role in our further growth and development.
Suffice it to say that you are a big big advocate, for private equity financing.
Yeah, in many ways. I think, our market tends to be very debt-centric.
Yeah.
I grew up in Southern California where Silicon Valley and now Silicon Beach are just a few stone throws away.
Uh-huh.
And, private equity kind of rules the day. It incubates numerous companies, and in doing so has created transformative industries. And I think there's a huge role for private equity to play, not just in helping companies to get started and to grow, but also really diversifying the overall economy, creating a more vibrant SME sector, and I think ultimately generating gains and returns for the national economy.
Okay, thanks a lot, Brian. Really appreciate that.
Great.